Before we dive into the incredible story you're about to hear, let's take a moment to reflect on the unimaginable. What if, after a near-death experience, a young boy returned with a message that could change the world? What if this child, having crossed over to the other side, brought back a warning from the most divine source imaginable? How could such an experience be explained? And what could it mean for all of us? Landon Whitley, an 8-year-old boy from North Carolina, experienced something that defies all reason. After a horrific car accident left him clinically dead not once, not twice, but 3 times, Landon returned with a message that shook not only his family, but the world. What did he witness during those moments when he was beyond this life? He had encountered Jesus himself, and the message he carried is both profound and chilling. This is the story of Landon Whitley's near-death experience, the peace and the terror he saw beyond life, and the urgent warning he brought back from heaven. Could what he experienced be a glimpse into something greater than our understanding? Let's listen closely, for this is more than a story. It's a call to change, a call to embrace love, and a call to never forget what truly matters. In 1997, a young boy named Landon Whitley experienced something extraordinary and chilling that would change his life forever. How could anyone comprehend the reality of such an event? After a horrific car accident left him clinically dead 3 times, he returned with memories that shook his family to the core. He claimed to have visited heaven and encountered Jesus himself, who gave him a haunting message meant for everyone on earth. What could a child possibly witness beyond the veil of life that would leave even adults speechless? This is the story of Landon Whitley's near-death experience and the terrifying warning he brought back from heaven. What if these words were a message we all need to hear? The Whitley family had been living a normal, quiet life in a peaceful neighborhood in North Carolina. Landon, an 8-year-old boy, was bright and curious, spending his days playing video games and riding his bicycle. But how could anyone imagine that such a tragic event would strike their family in the blink of an eye? His parents, Julie and Andy Whitley, were devout Christians who instilled strong values and a sense of faith in their son. Sundays were a special time for them. Church in the morning, followed by family meals and quality time together. But one Sunday afternoon, their routine was about to be shattered in an instant. What would it feel like to have everything you hold dear ripped away in an instant? Julie Whitley had just picked up Landon from Sunday school, and they were driving home, chatting about the lesson he had learned that day. Landon loved talking about Bible stories, and Julie cherished these innocent moments. But could they have known how quickly their peaceful world would turn to chaos? The sun was shining brightly, and everything felt peaceful. As they drove, the conversation turned to plans for the day. Perhaps a trip to the park, or a stop for ice cream. Andy Whitley, Landon's father, was driving ahead in another car. Without warning, an ambulance came speeding down the road, its sirens off and careening wildly out of control. It swerved into the path of the Whitley family's cars. The collision was brutal. Andy's car was struck first, and the impact sent it skidding into the guardrail. Julie barely had time to react before the ambulance crashed head-on into their car. The metal crumpled, glass shattered, and the world turned to chaos. Julie was knocked unconscious, and her last conscious thought was a prayer for her son. When first responders arrived, Landon was found pinned in the back seat, his body crushed and lifeless. Could anyone have known how much more was to come? As Landon's lifeless body was rushed to the hospital, doctors worked furiously to resuscitate him. They performed CPR and administered shocks with a defibrillator. After being declared clinically dead for the first time, something miraculous occurred. Landon's heart flickered back to life, but the relief was brief. His heart stopped again, and he was declared dead a second time. But what happened during those moments when he was clinically dead? During these moments, Landon experienced something beyond human comprehension. He later described it as a place filled with bright, gentle light, a golden meadow stretching endlessly around him. There, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace, free from pain or fear. Angels of radiant light surrounded him, and though they didn't speak, Landon felt their presence and love. What could this place have been? And what did it mean for him and for us? Then, a new figure emerged from the light, a man dressed in a simple white robe, his eyes radiating wisdom and kindness. Landon didn't need an introduction to recognize who it was. He instinctively knew it was Jesus. Without words, Jesus reached out and touched Landon's shoulder. In that touch, Landon felt a deep understanding, as though Jesus knew his entire life, every joy, every sorrow. Landon's heart raced, and though he was in awe, a part of him felt an overwhelming peace. But then something shifted. Jesus spoke. "You have to go back," he said, his voice filling Landon's soul with a sense of urgency. Landon, confused and reluctant, didn't want to leave such a peaceful place. He wanted to stay where everything felt safe and warm, free from pain. But Jesus' expression turned serious. "It's not your time yet," he said gently. "You have a purpose." Before Landon could protest, he was pulled back, the light fading as he was thrust back into his broken body. Landon's breath came in ragged gasps as he found himself back in the hospital, doctors frantically working to revive him. His body was battered, but the battle for his life was far from over. Just as they had managed to stabilize him, his vitals began to plummet once again. His heartbeat faded, and once more, the monitors flatlined. What could this mean? What was happening to him? This time, Landon was not met by the comforting light of the heavenly realm. Instead, he found himself in a solemn twilight-like space where he witnessed a vision of the world unlike anything he'd seen before. He saw mountains, oceans, and cities blurred together as if viewed from an unimaginable height. The earth appeared to be in a spiritual state, and in the distance, Landon noticed a dark, swirling cloud expanding slowly across the landscape. What was this ominous sight? This cloud was not made of rain or wind. It pulsed with malevolent energy, consuming the light and turning everything it touched into a lifeless gray. Landon's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to understand what was happening. The vision shifted, and Landon stood before Jesus once again. This time, the loving expression Landon had seen earlier was replaced with a deep sorrow. Jesus' eyes reflected an immense sadness, as if he could see the suffering of every soul on earth. "You need to understand why you were brought here," Jesus said, his voice filled with both authority and sadness. Jesus gestured toward the dark, swirling storm cloud. "This is what is coming," he said. "The choices people make every day are leading them toward this future. They are turning away from the light, from love, and embracing the darkness." Landon, overwhelmed and confused, asked, "What does it mean? What am I supposed to do?" Jesus' answer was simple yet chilling. "You must warn them. Tell them to change their ways. They have forgotten what matters. They need to remember love, compassion, and kindness, or this darkness will consume them. Landon's heart ached as he witnessed the suffering faces of people from all over the world, expressions filled with fear, pain, and hopelessness. Jesus placed a comforting hand on Landon's shoulder and explained, "You are here because your heart is pure. You can carry this message because you understand love in a way many have forgotten. People will listen to you because of your innocence." Before Landon could ask more questions, the vision faded, and he was once again enveloped in the golden light of heaven. Jesus knelt beside him and looked into his eyes with infinite tenderness. "You must remember this," he said softly. "When you return, it will be hard. You will be in pain and want to forget what you saw, but you must not. The world needs to hear this warning." Landon nodded, feeling an unshakable resolve grow within him. He didn't fully understand why he had been chosen, but he knew he had a task to fulfill. As Jesus smiled reassuringly, Landon was pulled back through a tunnel of darkness, and the peace of heaven vanished. Landon gasped awake in the hospital, his body battered and bruised but alive. The doctors were shocked. He had come back from death 3 times. But Landon wasn't the same. He had witnessed something no child should ever see, and now he carried the weight of a divine message, a terrifying warning meant for the world. When Landon Whitley awoke in the hospital, his body was gripped by pain. It radiated from every part of him, a deep, throbbing agony that made it hard to breathe. He was surrounded by machines, tubes, and wires, their rhythmic beeping, the only sound breaking the sterile silence of the room. His vision was blurry, and the harsh fluorescent lights overwhelmed his senses. It felt like waking from a nightmare, only to realize that the real nightmare was the world he had returned to. But how could he possibly share such a message? How would anyone believe the heavy burden he now carried? The world needed to hear this warning, and Landon was the messenger, but was he ready to deliver it? Julie, his mother, sat by his side. She looked pale, her face etched with worry and exhaustion. Though her own injuries were severe, she cared only for her son. Doctors had told her multiple times that Landon was unlikely to survive, and even if he did, the trauma to his brain might leave him in a vegetative state. Yet Landon had come back to life not once, not twice, but 3 times. The miracle of his survival overwhelmed her, and she whispered prayers of gratitude as she held his hand. When Landon's eyes fluttered open, he slowly turned his head, locking eyes with her. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He was flooded with emotions, but he managed a weak whisper, "Mom." Julie leaned in, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm here," she said, her voice breaking. Landon wanted to tell her everything he had seen, everything he had experienced during his time away from this world, but the words wouldn't come. It felt as though a great weight was pressing on his chest, preventing him from sharing the flood of memories that threatened to overwhelm him. He closed his eyes and took a slow breath, trying to sort through the confusion in his mind. He knew he had been somewhere else, a place far beyond this world, but how could he explain it? In the following days and weeks, Landon's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. The doctors were stunned by his progress. He had suffered traumatic brain injuries, fractures, and internal bleeding, but he defied every grim prognosis. Julie believed it was divine intervention, but even as she rejoiced in her son's recovery, She couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in him. He was quieter, more introspective. At times, he would stare off into space, as if lost in thought. What had happened to him during those moments when he was gone? What had he seen? It began with small things. One morning, as Julie helped him sit up in bed, Landon looked at her solemnly. "Mom," he said slowly, "I saw Dad." Julie froze. It had been weeks since the accident, and they hadn't spoken about Andy's death. She hadn't known how to tell Landon that his father was gone. But now, Landon, with a clarity that couldn't be denied, spoke of seeing his father in the light, happy and whole. "He said he's with Jesus now, and that he loves us," Landon added, his eyes filling with tears. "We'll see him again someday." Julie felt a wave of grief mixed with awe. She hadn't told him about the funeral or the sorrow that had overtaken her after Andy's passing, but Landon's words offered a kind of comfort, a sign that her prayers had been answered. Could this be a message from beyond? Was it possible that Landon had seen the truth? In the days that followed, Landon began to describe in more detail what he had experienced while he was clinically dead. He spoke of a golden light, angels, and a profound peace. At first, Julie thought these might be the remnants of a dream, the product of his injured mind. But the vividness and specificity of his descriptions made her believe that he had truly seen something beyond this world. He spoke of the field of light where he met Jesus, of the loving voice that had told him it wasn't his time yet, that he had a purpose to fulfill. Julie listened in stunned silence, her heart racing. The clarity with which her young son spoke of heaven and its wonders left her breathless. She had always believed in such things, but hearing her son describe them with such certainty made it all feel so real. Could it be that Landon had crossed over and returned with a message for all of them? Was there something more at work here, something greater than anyone could understand? Then came the day when Landon finally shared the part that troubled him the most, the message that Jesus had given him. It was a quiet afternoon, and the room was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. Julie was sitting by his bedside when Landon looked at her, his face pale and serious. "Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "there's something I need to tell you." Julie put down her book, sensing the weight of what he was about to say. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Jesus gave me a message," Landon said slowly. "He told me I have to tell people something important." Julie's heart skipped a beat. She leaned forward, her voice shaky. "What is it, Landon?" "He said that people need to change," Landon continued. "He showed me the world, and it was covered in darkness, like a storm. He said if people don't choose love, if they don't stop being selfish and angry, the darkness will keep spreading." Julie's hands trembled as she listened. The weight of his words felt like a heavy burden. This wasn't just a vision of the afterlife. It was a warning, a call for humanity to change its ways. How could they ignore such a message? Despite his small frame, Landon had been given a mission. He didn't know why Jesus chose him, but he understood the urgency of his task. "I'm just a kid," he admitted, his eyes filled with sadness. "But people might listen to me because I've been there." Julie, heartbroken, realized the weight of her son's mission. It was too much for him to bear alone, but she also knew they had no choice. Together, they would find a way to share his story, to spread the warning he had brought back from the edge of death. How could she protect him from this burden, yet help him fulfill it? Julie struggled with the decision to go public. She was still reeling from the accident and the loss of her husband. But Landon's words haunted her, and in her heart, she knew it was something that had to be shared. They began by telling close friends and family. The reactions were mixed. Some were moved, others skeptical. But Julie couldn't deny that what Landon said felt true. One Sunday, the pastor at their church invited them to speak. Hesitant but determined, Julie and Landon stood before the congregation. Landon spoke calmly and clearly, recounting his experience with Jesus, the peace, the light, and the warning. "I know it sounds crazy," he said, gripping the lectern with his small hands. "But I was there. I was with Jesus, and he showed me things that I can't forget. He gave me a message, and I have to tell you." Landon described the light, the angels, and the overwhelming love he had felt. Then, with a somber tone, he shared the warning. "People are forgetting what's important," he said. "We need to change, or the darkness will only get worse." The reactions were intense. Some were deeply moved, others skeptical. But Landon didn't seem affected by the doubt. "It doesn't matter if they believe me or not," he told his mother. "Jesus told me to share the message, and that's what I'm doing." Julie was struck by her son's strength and wisdom. He had been given a mission, a message, and he was determined to fulfill it, no matter the cost. What could be more important than that? As time passed, Landon's story spread beyond their community. News outlets picked up the story, and it went viral on social media. Some found renewed faith, while others criticized the story as a hoax. But Julie and Landon were resolute in their mission. The attention didn't change Landon. He remained the same humble boy, always focused on sharing his message of love. Landon's journey continued as he spoke at churches, community gatherings, and even in their living room. He never embellished his story, but always returned to the core message. People must choose love over hate, kindness over anger, and faith over fear. How could anyone ignore such a simple yet powerful truth? Years passed, and Landon's story became a legend in their community. People came from far and wide to hear him speak, to seek comfort, or simply to be near him. Julie watched with pride as her son grew into a young man, still carrying the message of love and light he had received from Jesus. Despite the tragedy they had endured, Julie found peace in knowing that Landon had brought back something extraordinary, an enduring reminder that even in the darkest times, love could overcome anything. And every day, in every act of kindness, Landon fulfilled the mission he had been given, to share the message of hope, love, and redemption. His story is a wake-up call for each of us to examine our own lives, especially in a world filled with anger, hatred, and division. Small acts of love and kindness can make a big difference, and we can be the ones to spread light in this world. Everyone, no matter who they are or where they are, can bring about positive change by choosing to love, forgive, and live for their community. Share this story as a reminder that no matter how difficult life may seem, there is always a bright path, and that path is love, patience, and kindness. Every day, every action can be part of a journey of healing and hope for those around us. Thank you for your listening.